Recently, a phenomenon has caught the attention of tourists and residents of Cairo City in Egypt. Various dogs are being seen in the Gazelle Highlands. Locals were built with the pyramids and the greatest Finge, behaving in a rather peculiar way to say the least. They are wandering the monuments, especially the Cheops pyramids, the largest among them. They are always wandering, climbing, and entering the cracks, and some testimonies affirm that they seem to be hypnotized. One of them even managed to reach the top of the building, which measures about 140 meters, and was flagrantly flagged by the local paratroopers. The fact is quite common, especially by the esoteric charge that that region carries. Many are associating the event to the former god Anubis, the guardian of life after death. The mummification of the pyramids. Is this phenomenon really a mystical meaning? Are the Egyptians right all this time, and we are close to witnessing a great revelation? That's it, we're going to check it out. It is no secret to anyone that the civilization of ancient Egypt was one of the greatest of all ancient times. They dominated various sciences such as medicine, astronomy, history, sociology, in addition to being exime builders and farmers, which made it possible for its empire to extend itself by millennia, surviving and dominating other cultures that could not stop their intellectual and military power. And one of the most intriguing aspects of all Egyptian culture, without a doubt, is its religion. The myths they developed throughout the centuries were extremely rich in details, and were able to explain practically all the reality around them. And the most intriguing feature of their belief was precisely the divinities, which, in addition to being numerous in its majority, were anthropomorphic. That is, they had human and animal forms at the same time. One of the great highlights of this pantheon was god Zanubis, the Lord of Death, the Subworld, Guide of Souls, and the Judge of Eternity. He was represented with the body of a man in the head of a Canadale, which many identify as a shackle, a sloth, or a domesticated dog, being the most likely is that its final form is a mixture among them. Before the arrival of the Greeks, which occurred due to the lack of the 7th century BC, Zanubis was also known as Impu. In the Egyptian language of the time, the root of its name could mean a real child, but he was more known for its titles. The most common were the one who was on his mountain, the Lord of the Sacred Land, the dog that roams millions, and the one who was in the place of the embalming. In mythology, Zanubis was identified as the god of the subworld, the guardian of souls. The most important character in the territory of the alien, and this is not little, after all death, was the most important passage ritual for the Egyptians. They not only believed in eternal life, but also considered that the soul could reincarnate in the same body. Therefore, it was important to treat it with procedures such as mummification. Zanubis was present in all stages of this ritual. He was responsible for receiving the soul and taking it to the judgment, the heavy heart. At this moment, the heart of the deceased would be placed in a balance, along with the pen of truth of the God of truth, justice and order, the Mat. If the heart, although less or equal to the pen, means that his owner would have taken a pure life, so Anubis would accompany him through the Nile to the field of Eru, the paradise of Egypt. However, if the heart was heavier, that is, if that person had taken a pure life, his soul would be devoured by the demon Amit, a hybrid composed of parts of lion and hippopotam and crocodile. A pleasant fate, right? All these attributes were confirmed to Anubis during the Kingdom or the Old Empire, also known as the Pyramids era, which lasted until 2181 BC. After that, in the Kingdom or the Middle Empire, some of its functions were transferred to Osiris, which also began to have a lot of credibility in mythology. Actually, Osiris would have been the first mummification of Egypt. After his body was fragmented by his brother Seth, Anubis would have been responsible for his embalming. So this began to be his main function, taking care of the process of mummification. And this, in keeping the tombs, pyramids, and taking the souls to Osiris to be judged, and to the field of Eru, which I put with a similar function to the Qurani, the boatman of the subworld of Greek mythology. But why was Anubis represented as a man's hybrid being with a kind of canine? This is one of the most interesting parts of its history. After all, Egyptian culture was totally based on images. From the representation of its gods to the ornamentation of important monuments to its writing, which instead of letters itself said used hieroglyphs, which are small drawings that built complex senses when combined. We know that dogs were seen as sacred animals in ancient Egypt. There are numerous evidence of this, including the sepultures of these animals, that could be compared to the people of the highest positions in the province. Many times, the animals were buried together with the families because they believed that they would meet again in eternal life. But beyond this importance, the choice of the representation of Anubis may have another reason. It turns out that the shakais and the dogs in general were always seen rounding the cemeteries. This made the image of the canine gods associated with the funeral services, the department that was responsible for the Anubis gods. In fact, it is even difficult to identify which species is associated, because its representations seem to mix elements of various different beings. In the Eastern Africa, where Egypt is located, the representatives of the family of the canine gods are quite common. There are wolves, shakais, rabbits, dogs, both wild and domestic. In the representation of an animal of Anubis, which is appearing on the screen now, it is possible to identify elements of several different animals. The pointed ears seem to be more like rabbits. The X-gill body resembles the Galbo race, a domestic dog. The tail is similar to a shakau, although it is longer and narrower than the normal one, while the fox seems to be like a wolf, although it is also longer than the usual one. The entire color of the black is not so common in these species, and probably has its own meaning. But even though the iconographic representation of Anubis has elements of several canine species, historically it was associated with the shakais. But this probably happened because of behavioral issues. Of all members of the Canidae family, it was the shakais that were seen rounding the cemeteries more frequently. And this happened mostly in open tunnels, probably because they were looking for food. Those who have or have a dog at home know that they have the habit of burying food on these lenses to look for them later. And this happens with all the representatives of this family, including wolves, aposes, and of course the shakais. In addition, the canines can also be fed with meat when necessary, although they are eminently hunters for nature. This is the hazy cemeteries, which no matter how similar the canines are, belong to another family of animals. That is why the representation of Anubis, the god of death and the funeral rituals, was associated with the shakais. And that is also why people immediately remembered the ancient god when they saw dogs, behaving in an apparently strange way around the Great Pyramid of Guys. But can this mean any precepts there in the underworld? From here we're talking about a matter of faith. There is a divine action regarding the behavior of the animals by a matter of faith. The gods of ancient Egypt are no longer as common in local culture, at least in what is referred to as rites and religion. However, there are modern representatives who perform the same function. In Christianity, for example, Jesus Messiah is with the substantial God the Father, who will judge the dead. In Judaism, this is the duty of Yahweh, and Islamism to there. All these are monotheistic religions and have their own characteristics to explain the moral ethics of reality. What happens after death? This means that some people may interpret the phenomenon as an indication of the final judgment. But as I said, this is just a matter of opinion and faith. On the other hand, those who believe that the occurrence is something common in the region, and that it is not necessary to explain it through metaphysical and theological concepts. Tourismologists and local residents say that these scenes are quite common, especially because the Guys Plateau is a place often visited by tourists, who eventually feed these animals that do not have owners or tutors. The most unusual case was the dog that managed to climb and get to the top of the Great Pyramid. But according to Marshall Mosher, the YouTuber and parapet that made the record, the animal was just playing and hunting pigeons and soon went down to join his companions at the base of the monument. Well, don't let it be a curious fact, right? Until next time.